I've got props for today. Uh-oh. What do you think's going to happen? You want me to juggle? Do you think I can juggle? That's it. No. Many years ago, I saw a juggler, and I went into the library because a friend of mine worked there and asked for a book in juggling. So I learned to juggle when I was about 16. So I always wanted to juggle 5. I can't. The most I can sometimes get up to is 4. So, but anyway, we're going to use these, and you're going to be playing with these later. The story for Time for All Ages today comes from the Jewish tradition. And it's a famous story. Izzy, are you coming down? No. Okay, you're going to miss out because I've got 5 of these and there's only 3 here. Okay. Well, this story is a very famous story from the Jewish tradition, and it's called David and Goliath. Have you heard of that story? No? No? Well, this is a story, it's quite common in our culture. You often hear talking about David and Goliath where they talk about an underdog. Do you know what an underdog is? It's when someone's not expected to succeed or win or do anything. Morning, Izzy. And so underdogs are people who are not really expected to win or do well, but they kind of defy the odds and they actually succeed when they're not expected. And this is a famous story about David and Goliath, about underdogs. David was the shepherd's boy. He was young. He was probably just maybe a little bit older than you, but he had 8 brothers, and he was the youngest. So there was this war going on between the Israelites and the Philistines, and David was an Israelite, and his brothers had all gone off to this battle, but he wasn't able to go because he was too young. He was a shepherd. He had to stay and look after his family's sheep. Now, people think of shepherds as kind of just walking along with a dog, but you've got to realize back in the old days, the sheep would get attacked by bears and wolves. So David became quite adept at a sling where he would throw rocks to kind of scare off the bears and scare off the wolves that were attacking the sheep. But that's what he did during the day, but one day his dad said to him, "Could you go and take food to your brothers who are preparing for a big battle?" And so David said, "Sure." So he went down, and then he saw the 2 armies lined up, and then this giant person called Goliath came up. And according to the books in the Jewish scripture, he says he was 9 feet tall. Now, I'm 6'6", so that would be way up there. So maybe he wasn't that tall, but he was very tall, and he was taller than everyone else around him. So, but he came out and he kept challenging the other team. "Will someone not come and fight me?" And he was clad in armor, he had a big sword, and he was kind of scary looking, like a bit like myself. He was really scary looking. And so he could come out and he would threaten the other army. But no one wanted to fight him because guess why? They were too scared. I'd be scared if someone was 9 feet tall. And so they were really scared, but David wasn't scared. And David said, "I'll take him on." And so David walked out, and the king of the Israelite army gave David all his armor, but he was little. So it just wore him down. He said, "I'm not going to take the armor. I don't want your sword. I'm going to take my sling." And he picked up 5 stones from this riverbed. He said, "I'm just going to face this giant warrior with these 5 stones." So he did. And he went out, and the guy was lumbering towards him. He's like, when you actually read the story, he's kind of awkward and clumsy. He doesn't move very quick. Also a bit like myself. and so he was lumbering towards him. But David was really fast. So he got the sling, and he threw a stone at him. And it hit him in the head and knocked the giant out. And so the other army got really scared by this, and they all ran away at that point. So he actually stopped this big battle happening by knocking him out. And that's a famous story because David wasn't expected to win. He was young. He was small, he didn't have armor, he didn't have weapons. But David was really quite clever. He used what he was good at, the sling. So I want to act that out now. So I want you to be David. So can you take one of these? Anyone else want one? Graham? So I'm going to be Goliath. And I'm going to come after you and see if any of you can hit me. Okay? Wide. So I bet you remember the story of David and Goliath now. Was that fun? Yeah. Well, next thing we're going to do, I'm going to teach you to juggle sometime. Okay? Who would like to learn to juggle? Okay, I'll teach you to juggle. But right now, it's time for your religious education classes. So thanks very much for listening, and thanks for participating. And you're all very good shots.
One of the things that I do regularly is read or listen to books and podcasts that have topics that inspire me. Recently, Grace Harry was a guest on a podcast I enjoy. She wrote a book called The Joy Strategist. The title caught my attention because, as some of you may recall, after Dave died, I saw a post with hashtag #JoySeeker in a Facebook group for people whose partner had died. It was the year anniversary of his death, and nothing made more sense to me than seeking joy. While there were still many fears I had and no idea how my life could be rebuilt, I didn't even see the margins of where I might go. I realized that I could choose joy amidst the darkness. It changed my life. Grace Harry said on this podcast, if you want to feel pleasure and happiness and joy and connection and the truth of your heart, you've got to jump in and live there. Yes, live in my heart and not my fear. To me, this is not spiritual bypassing or denying difficult times and difficult feelings. What she's saying, and this matches my own experience, is that while I feel these hard things and I'm going through a very difficult time, I can still choose to do things that bring me flashes of joy. She recommends joy snacks, where a joy snack is a small thing you can do to take care of yourself or feel a bit of happiness. The phrase strikes me as being very kitschy, but sometimes it's the simple ideas that can have the largest impact. While I was deeply grieving and felt completely lost, a therapist recommended that I get out in nature every day. During one of those sessions with her, I confessed to her that I was reading trashy romantic comedies. I thought I should be doing something more worthwhile with my time. I'll never forget what she said to me. It makes complete sense that you want to escape your reality, which is very challenging right now with a romance novel. You've just lost the love of your life. It's exactly what you need. These books gave me an escape, a moment of joy from the terrible reality I was living each and every day at that time. At this time in our country, many are struggling with the results of the election. I've talked to friends who are scared for their daughters of reproductive age, friends who are scared that our democracy is at risk. I'm scared for our healthcare system, for the patients we serve at Sonrisas, whose care is funded by Medicaid, and many of them do not have legal status in the United States. Healthcare is a justice issue I care deeply about, and I already see the election results affecting the system of care. I know that if I sat with a group of 10 of you here in the sanctuary today, we could list many, many more things to be worried about. Those worries are well-founded, and we have to ask ourselves how we're going to move forward and live with hope. I believe hope can help us get up in the morning and make a difference. This is where Joy Snacks can come in. She talks about Joy Snacks being a strategy, a structure that is built into our lives to buoy us as a reminder of all the happiness that is available. Like a safety net, allowing our nervous system to know it's safe to go into the dark emotions when they come. Like a practice of self-care. We may need many ways to care for ourselves in the next 4 years. For me, taking a moment to really see the hummingbird enjoying the flowers in my garden, the fall leaves, or taking a deep, slow breath. All of these things bring me joy and help me handle distress and heavy feelings and difficult times. Things that bring me joy also often inspire hope. Taking a moment to really see the stamen inside a tiny flower. Watch a spider web glistening in the morning dew. Smile as my dog Toby prances with happiness at the beginning of his walk. All of these things bring me joy and are my Joy Snacks. Nature knows nothing about politics, continuing its cycle through the season, going from winter dormancy to spring blooms, summer lushness, and fall harvest. Renewal happens in nature, and it will keep cycling, unaware of who is sworn into office on January 20th. Nature gives me hope for the future. Today, I encourage you to think about what some joy snacks that might help you are ground and take care of yourself over the next 4 years, and to look for connections between what brings you joy and what makes you feel hopeful. Not only can joy and hope make you happier, but perhaps there will be a butterfly effect, where your moment of joy and my moment of joy and your neighbor's moment of joy bring about the exact response our country needs to heal and move forward. Today, maybe we can begin by sharing one of our own joy snacks with somebody during coffee hour. I wish us all many, many moments of joy.
Tracey talked quite beautifully and powerfully about the importance of our healthcare system. And I want to talk about a specific aspect of healthcare, specifically mental health. Religion is fundamentally and at its core is about mental health, about people's mental welfare. Mental health beyond the idea of just mental illness, but including mental illness, but really about mental health. It's part of who we are as pluralism, as inclusiveness. We do a lot to welcome people through all their struggles, bring their whole selves here, bring their loneliness, bring their anxiety, bring their depression, bring their addictions, bring everything here, and we will hold you in love, in care, and compassion. Many of us are very concerned right now about many aspects of our country. Our Surgeon General has come out with saying we have a pandemic of loneliness. He's also said that there's a pandemic of mental health concerns, particularly around anxiety and depression amongst our youth and young adults. And many of us who know youth, who have gone through their youth during the pandemic, experienced that firsthand. Anxiety is the most common diagnosis for everyone in the United States. 1 in 5 people are identified as having a mental health crisis, and a large percentage of that is around anxiety. And it's understandable. We have the existential crisis of climate change. We have wars throughout the world. We have terrorist attacks. We have violence in schools. We have huge amount of drug problems. specifically fentanyl right now. As Tracey mentioned, we have inadequate health care. Our political system is fragmented and ineffective. So if you were not hopeless before you came in, you probably are now. So what's the practice of hope amidst hopelessness? You know, and hope is not one of these things that you just, I get more hopeful. It's a roller coaster. It's like grief. I think grief and hope are often playing off together. But for all of those mental health crises, hope is part of healing. And hope is essentially this expectation or desire that something will happen to make things better. And also crucial to hope is that social connection and social support. And that's why religious communities have a huge part to play in addressing mental health and mental illness in our culture. Removing the stigma that too much mental health carries. It is not a character flaw, it is an illness, as is addiction. And it's a terribly hard illness for those who surround their loved one struggling with mental health crisis. And every one of us, who here knows someone with a mental health crisis? It's unanimous. Myself, I have a daughter that struggles with depression and ADHD. I had a mother who struggled with Alzheimer's. I think my dad had undiagnosed depression. Natalie, my partner, often is open about this. I'm not sharing anything she wouldn't. Has struggled with depression. And I don't think I'm atypical. I think that's, all of us struggle with this. Knowing someone or our own personal struggles around that. And hope can occur in isolation. But I think it grows best when we are connected to others in a supportive and inspiring collective, such as this religious community. I was uplifted by what Ken played there. I hadn't heard it before. There was an uplift to that. And it was a song about struggle. So these things go hand in hand. A community such as this of people who are striving towards hope. We're not all hopeful all the time. If you are, you're just not paying attention. If you are not, but if someone who's hopeful can inspire others. Elie Wiesel, who many of you know was a Holocaust survivor, he wrote the book Night. He was a teenager when he was in the concentration camps. He's Jewish and writer and activist. And he says this, just as despair can come to one another from other human beings, hope too can be given to one another by other human beings. Those are the words of Elie Wiesel. Let me read them again. Just as despair can come to one another from other human beings, hope too can be given to one only by other human beings. Hope is contagious. Hope is contagious. So I invite you to think, where do you get your sources of hope? Is it external? Is it internal? Or is it some combination of both? And where do we go for hope in tough times? And specifically, where do we go for hope when we've got loved ones or we ourselves are struggling with mental illness, mental health, be it anxiety, depression, ADHD, addiction? Our Share the Plate today was Minister's Choice, and I chose, as I chose last year, NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness, the San Mateo County. And basically NAMI's phrase is you are not alone. You are not alone. You're not alone in your mental illness. You're not alone with someone who is caring for or loving someone who has mental illness. You are not alone. And some of you may know this, but NAMI has got its roots in San Mateo County in the 1970s and 1980s. It was a group of parents who, they all had adult children who struggled with schizophrenia. And any of you know about schizophrenia, it's one of the toughest diseases for the person to deal with and for the loved ones caring for them to deal with. So it's a group of parents who got together, 3 specifically, who started it in San Mateo County. And they hoped, this was their goal, they hoped for a time when mental illness could be discussed openly. Remember, this was 1970s. And their ill children and family members could be properly cared for in their own communities. Accomplishing these seemingly simple goals was not easy. We know the struggle of talking about mental illness, admitting to mental illness, admitting to the not knowing what to do around mental illness that so many of us, loved ones, struggle with. And the key points for NAMI was that hope is a powerful tool for addressing some of the most prevalent mental health concerns. And it's been proven with research that those who are more hopeful in their treatment have a higher rate of recovery. How do we foster hope? How do we grow hope for those who are where it seems far, far away? Well, NAMI, like our own social justice programs, have 3 elements to it. It's got education for the family and for the people struggling with it. It's got support, reminding people they're not alone, providing best practices in how to care for yourself and to care for others. And as all good social justice has, it's got advocacy. It wants to change government policy and cultural norms around how people with mental health are treated. So there's advocacy, there's support, and there's education. So for any of you who are looking for support, there's a lot of great classes that NAMI runs. There's a lot of great programs, education, website information in San Mateo County, and they also pass you on to various resources in San Mateo County. If you want to get involved in advocacy, which is the real key element of justice, you can also do that. So I encourage you, when we do the Share the Plate today, think generously. Think of those who are most touched by mental illness in your life or your own experience of mental illness. Think of organizations that have helped you, and please give as generously as you can to our Share the Plate recipient for this month, National Alliance for Mental Illness. Their website's in the order of service. The morning offering will now be given and gratefully received, and I thank Ken for being here with us and for playing more music. Well, I hope you've got all kinds of time, because I've got the second half of my sermon to give you. So. You have not got any plans today, have you? A couple of weeks ago, and for most of this year, I've been talking about how important it is to replace any sense of political identity with a spiritual identity. And a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned I was going to do a series about the classical religious stories that permeate in our culture. You might have recognized the story for the Time for All Ages this morning. And I know the highlight was me getting pelted with juggling balls. But the David and Goliath story is a classic story. I struggle with the interpretation of it that's most typical, though. Of course, it's the underdog story, and that's great, and Dave had faith in God and knew God would be on his side, and yeah, that's good. And also, the real connection for the Jewish people is that the idea that David was somewhat exceptional religious figure who had some special relationship with God. I get a little bit troubled with the kind of divinely sanctioned violence in such stories, and it permeates much of religious literature throughout the world, the divinely sanctioned violence. And I also have a personal concern, a very personal concern about how the way big people are portrayed in that story. We know we're clumsy, we know we're awkward, but we suffer enormously every time we fly. God is already punishing us. You don't need to mock us either. I do want to point out that generally in presidential elections, the taller candidate wins, which does not bode well for future women candidates. But we live in hope, because hope is what this service is about. And I think that's one of the missing elements of that story. Dave, I'm in first names terms with him. David has hope. He knows that he can win what seems like a hopeless cause. And he does it. And I think this is an important part of the story. He does it because he's smart. He does it because he recognizes his own agency. He rejects the king's armor, the king's sword, the king's shield. He goes with a sling because that's what he's familiar with. That's what he fought off bears and wolves as a shepherd. He went to what his skills were. He was smaller. He could move faster than Goliath. He was smart, and he used the strengths, the skills, his unique advantages. And I think that gets lost a little bit in that story. Like most stories in religious literature, God gets all the credit. There's a certain amount of human agency there that I think is important as well. It is a story that inspires hope for me, and it's a story because it is an improbable victory. And the Jewish scholar Maimonides said, hope is belief in the plausibility of the possible as opposed to the necessity of the probable. Hope is belief in the plausibility of the possible as opposed to the necessity of the probable. So I think we can be inspired by hope, but we can also be inspired by our own power and creativity to respond to the stories in our life. Respond powerfully and creatively will inspire hope within ourselves. I loved what Tracey was saying earlier about the joy snacks. That's a creative way of dealing with one of the hardest events you could have in your life, losing a loved one. Most people would not think of going towards joy. Joy seeker, was that your hashtag? That's a creative and powerful and counterintuitive response to dealing with grief. But the other thing about underdogs, and David definitely is an underdog, is they're often more motivated. Because those in power are definitely motivated to keep power. But underdogs are motivated because they want change. They want to reorient the challenge in terms that will make it hopeful that success will happen. David was certainly motivated by religion, but he was also motivated because his family was at risk. His brothers were in potential victims. And I think, I was talking earlier about mental health, how many of us have family members who are struggling with it. That motivates us to how can we be beacons of hope to family members who are struggling with mental illness? How can we find hope ourselves? How do you bring hope manifest in your own life? That is religious work, spiritual work, and it's vital work that we do is how do we manifest hope, not just for ourselves, but as Tracey talked about, we can influence others because as I mentioned earlier, hope is contagious. And I know it's a struggle to be hopeful right now. But what are you going to do? What creative way are you going to do to find hope in your life? I love, there's a story about the creative approach of children. And it's a story I told many years ago here. It was about the truck that gets wedged under a bridge. It gets stuck, and all the adults are trying to get the truck loose, and they're trying all sorts of things, and the truck's just getting more and more wedged. And this young child's grabbing the guy in charge, and the guy says, go away, and ignoring him. Child says, keeps pestering them, because we all know if children are good at anything, they're really good at pestering adults. And he's pestering, and the guy said, so I suppose you think you've got a solution? He goes, yes. Well, what is it? Why don't you let some air out the tires of the truck? That would work. But no one thought about that. They were looking at a child was able to look at that problem differently. And that's what we have to do in our connections to hope. We have to find those sources of joy, because joy can inspire us to hope. We also need to find places of joy and celebration, because it's really hard to be hopeful when you're dealing with sadness or anxiety. If you're anxious or if you're depressed, it's really hard to find that path to joy. Perhaps you can't get to joy. Perhaps you can only get as far as kindness. And that's good. Maybe you can't be joyful, but you can be kind. And I know there was a friend of mine and said, I can't make it to joy, but I hope to make it to kindness. It's a pretty good goal. So where can we go on the path to joy? Because I think through kindness you are on that path to joy. The creative thinking of David is an important part of the story. He overcame even seemingly insurmountable odds. And that inspired one of our 20th century Unitarians, James Luther Adams, to propose the 5 smooth stones of liberal religion. And Adams was one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. And he says this: the resources, divine and human, that are available for the achievement of meaningful change justify an attitude of ultimate optimism. The resources, divine and human, that are available for the achievement of meaningful change justify an attitude of ultimate optimism. As I've said many times, being Scottish, I don't do optimism, but I do hope. I can't assume things are going to come out well, but I have that hope, and I'm willing to work towards that, to bring that good, to bring that compassion, to bring that kindness, to bring that justice, to bring that care for everyone in our society forward. James Luther Adams' 5 smooth stones was a way of building a more just, loving and free world. And Alex could have the slide now. And the first stone reminds us that we are part of a living tradition in which revelation is continuous. Divine revelation is continuous. It wasn't God's making, the divine making itself manifest was not centered 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. The divine is always exposing itself to us. The second stone reminds us that we freely choose to enter into relationship and community with one another. The third stone reminds us that we have the moral obligation to work towards establishing a just and loving community. Our fourth stone reminds us that good things happen as a result of human effort. And our first stone reminds us that the divine and human capacities for achieving meaningful change are reason for optimism and hope. So just so you remember, I'm going to throw these at you to wake you up. So let's read the first one. Revelation continues. Jason? Can you read together? Revelation is continuous. Can you keep the slide up? Good cat. Sorry, I need to see it as well. Sorry. Second one, freely. Who wants next? Dawn. Don't want to damage your hands. Yay! Third one, getting to know justice. Fourth one. Oh. It's only fair. I got these thrown at me earlier. It's only fair I can throw them back at you. What we do matters to others. And the fifth one, Tracey. So the story of David and Goliath from 3,000 years ago, and James Luther Acton took these in the 20th century. He was not a naive man. He got interviewed by the Gestapo. He was in Nazi Germany in the 30s. He saw what evil could be. But he developed these 5 stones as a way of trying to center what is religious community. And when you look at it, it talks about evolution, freedom and covenant, justice, agency, hope and faith. And you can see how these 5 stones actually play out in the new values that we just adopted in June 2024. Thank you. You can put the slide away now. Thank you, tech team. Perhaps hope can be best justified if we tap into divine resources beyond ourselves. We all have Goliaths in our lives. Goliaths being those insurmountable obstacles that prevent our life being as we wish it to be. And these obstacles become bigger when we do not believe we have the resources, the wisdom, and the strength to overcome them. If I believed the outcome of a more just, caring world depended on me alone, I would give up. But I know it depends on us. Those here, those online, and those well beyond this wall. And continuous revelation reminds me that I always need to be creative in thinking about changes, to thinking about how can I do things differently? How can I manifest the divine love that I believe guides the universe? How can I manifest that in new and different ways, daily, weekly, monthly? And of course, we do it in relationship. There's a tension we have in Unitarian Universalism. We love the freedom to explore, but we covenant in how we wish to be with one another. We've got tension between freedom and covenant, but we make the commitment that we are going to be in relationship with each other, and we're going to strive to be in right relationships. And if we get out of relationship, we accept that we will be called back, or we will call others back into relationship. So let us acknowledge our fears, our doubts, our struggles are real. But let us engage our Goliaths. Engage them with inspiration, with agility, with creativity, and above all, in our hope in the justice of our cause and the integrity of our action.